Okay, so today I want to do something a bit interesting. Um, if you don't know, if you haven't been watching my channel, if you're brand new to the channel, or you just like used to watch video essays that I used to do, or whatever, maybe you know me in real life and you find this video somehow. Um, I did a Kickstarter for my game Fatal Knockout, which you can see in sort of there underneath a pile of stuff which I've been using to do photo shoots for the game. You can also actually see a copy on that side as well. Oop, there we go. I launched a Kickstarter for my board game Fatal Knockout March 2023, I believe, and so it's relatively close to 2 years since I launched, and something which I really like and I like to see, but I don't see it too often on the internet, is people doing like really, really honest post-mortems of their Kickstarter and how it went, how the crowdfunding went, how the manufacturing and fulfillment went, if you're making something physical, if you're digital, how development went, and then, how the reception was, say if you're making a video game or something like that. But I just find it really interesting, and there's going to be hopefully a lot of lessons which I've definitely learned. I've definitely learned a lot of lessons, but a lot of lessons which hopefully through this like sort of more conversational video, rather than like a bullet point video, you will also learn as well, which should hopefully be helpful to some people who are looking to make crowdfunding campaigns. Maybe they've already made a couple and they want to know how to potentially improve. I'm not like the biggest, bestest crowdfunding expert in the world. I've had like 4 successful crowdfunding campaigns, but they've by no means been like an Exploding Kittens or like a Simon Kickstarter where it does millions. The very modest, but they get over the line, and that allows me to make games, which is the only thing I've ever wanted to do. And if you're in a similar boat, then maybe crowdfunding can help you with that. But yeah, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get up the Kickstarter page just so you have the context of like what the Kickstarter was. This screen should be right. Nope, this one. There we go. So yeah, this game is called Fatal Knockout. It is a 1-2 player fighting game inspired by old school arcade fighters. It's played on an arcade cabinet, which is the box, which is pretty cool. And yeah, 1-2 players, 20 to 30 minutes, 14 plus. That's pretty much the game. In more detail, the game is kind of like the game looks a lot different than here now. It's changed quite a bit. But yeah, it's essentially a movement programming game. So you have a hand of 3 cards. Whoever's the leader, which changes every round, plays a card face up. Your opponent plays a card face up, and then the rest of the cards, if the leader chooses to play more cards, are played face down. So you get that sort of initial like, oh, that's kind of the idea of what they're going for. So I'm going to counter that to I have no idea what's going to happen. So you can have like some bluffing and that sort of thing. There's a bunch of card management. So you draw 3 cards, but also you can pocket cards for later. You can discard cards. You can really control your deck, and the deck's only small. It's only 14 cards without your ultimate KO card, which you get if you reach the end of the meter track here. So yeah, you can learn your deck quite easily. It's more so about using the tools on the cards in interesting and creative ways in order to do damage, and the aim of the game is to do 5 damage to your opponent before they deal it to you. So yeah, the game went for 34 quid on for the base game, which is about $44. For the expansion, it was an extra 20 quid, so an extra like, I don't know, $25, something like that. So this would have probably totaled like 60, maybe close to $70 for the base game plus expansion. And so yeah, this is another thing as well. The Kickstarter launched with a base game and with an expansion, which is the first thing I've ever done like that. Like I've never done that before, and the reason as to why I did that was just because we had more fighters designed and arted, and it would have driven up the cost too much for the base game for it to. I thought it'd be too much of a hard sell. So it would have probably bumped it up to like a 50 quid game, maybe probably close to like a 54 quid game, like the combination of the two value that. But this one, if people just wanted the base game, they could get it for 34, and then so we did an expansion as well, which meant the goal had to be higher. The goal was £7,000. We got 9,425, so we were overfunded by like 20%, so 120% overfunded. which is great. But yeah, the highest goal I've ever had, the previous highest goal I ever had was 1,500, and that was with, or maybe it was 2,500 with blockers. But anyway, my last Kickstarter, it was 1,500 with Langskip, which I think we overfunded by 200%, which is great. So yeah, a lot of challenges. Again, more money than I've ever asked for to be able to make a game before. Most expensive game by far. But yeah, it worked and it was great. Print and Play did really well as well, 38 backers. But one thing to note here is that yeah, so base game 29 backers, expansion 136, and then the pledge manager as well afterwards. Like the like a lot of people from the 29 backers ended up getting the Oddities expansion as well, and then new people which came in to do late pledges, most of them got the expansion with it too. But yeah, so that's kind of like the overview of the Kickstarter. But before we get into that, let's talk about what we're going to do is we're going to break down sort of the different stages of the game from start to finish. And if you want to see this in maybe more detail, maybe less detail, it depends on how much I ramble. I actually do have an update on the Fatal Knockout Kickstarter page where it kind of breaks down all this in a big post-mortem, because what I wanted to do is I wanted to explain to the backers what happened like on every step of the way and give context, but also I wanted to have it as like a time capsule for anybody, because we want to make a bunch of expansions for Fatal Knockout. We want this to be like a long staying product on people's shelves and for it to grow over time. Just because, yeah, I think it's just really good, to be honest. So we want it to be like a time capsule for people to go back on and look at how it went, and that will help them inform whether they want to get onto the journey for future Fatal Knockouts or future other Crab Studios games that we end up doing. So yeah, first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the development of the game, because the development of the game was quite interesting. So the development of Fatal Knockout, it all started, like, just to give you a backstory of how the idea came to be. I used to have a job before I got into the games industry. Like a non-game industry job called where I delivered pizzas, essentially. So as I was waiting for just deliveries to come in, because it was a bit of a slow night, I was sat on a pile of pizza boxes, obviously unfolded, and I was just looking at my phone, and it just came to me. I was like, I can't think of, this is before I knew that there are a couple of tabletop fighting games out there, like Exceed, for example. But I was like, I've never seen a tabletop fighting game before. Like, I feel like it could be achieved, because a lot of the core fighting game mechanics and principles is more about planning, and execution is obviously massively important, but you're sort of like planning out steps and planning out combinations of actions, and like you could do that with card play, and that's how it started, really. And I went to Tabletop Simulator and put a prototype together, and people really liked it. It was very basic at first, so it was essentially just like, it was the I've got the wrong color here, so it was essentially just a board like this. But what was interesting, actually, so I'll draw it out, is we had a board which had obviously like all the grids, and so you can move from left to right because it is a grid-based movement. But also what it had like 2 platforms as well, because I've never what's the word? Like, I've never said, or like pretended, that's the word, to be a massive fighting game player. I've played fighting games before. I've played a lot of Super Smash Bros, which is what I'm going to get to here. I've also played Tekken, Street Fighter. I played a lot of fighting games, but never to the level of some people. Like, so obviously people who get really into fighting games get really into fighting games. But yeah, Super Smash Bros was my jam, as most people who played a fighting game would probably say that they've probably played Super Smash Bros quite a lot. And if they get more into it, then they probably say, Super Smash Bros, that's bad, But yeah, so you used to have platforms, so you used to be able to move left and right, like the actions are like, move left, or move right, or move in front and move behind, because it depends on which way your fighter's facing, because you'd have like a little face here, and so if your fighter's facing, this way, then it would be forward would be this way, but if they're facing this way, then this action would actually be this way, even though the arrow says right. It's a bit confusing at first, but it's pretty simple once you understand it and play with it. But also you had actions like, you had like a thing above you as well, and you could go above and you could go below. And that just like, especially with a 14 card deck, that was a nightmare. So we ended up just getting rid of these. And then after that, that was like, there's a bunch of other things as well, like Dan, Joker, you might know him from the Discord server. He helped come up with the meter track. So we had like the game, like it was essentially just play cards and you just try and kill your opponent, but there wasn't any real forward progression. But one thing which Dan suggested, which I really, really liked, is that on the player board, there was room to have like just sort of like a little track at the top. So you have like a track up here, and you have, but kind of like the board, you have like spaces which you can move up. And when you get to the end, you get like an ultimate card. But along the way, you also get like other bonuses as well. Like you might get a shield or something like that. But you'd have like a KO card at the end. And the way you do this is that on the top of cards, there is this icon, which is like a diamond. And depending on how many of those icons there are, you get to move up the meter track. So if there's 2, then you go from here to here. If there's like 3 from here, then you go 1, 2, 3. And as you go past, you attach a shield to your fighter. And then if you got another 2, then you get to go 1, 2, and then you get your KO card and you add that to your deck. Which I think is pretty snazzy. And it was something which Dan suggested, and that's one of the reasons why he's credited as co-designer on the project. It wasn't just someone who helped playtest the game. Like, it's obviously incredibly important to have playtesters on your project, like 1,000,000%. But he went further, and he had so many really cool and interesting ideas which like fundamentally changed the game. And he not only with just this, but also with, you know, all the different fighters and that sort of thing. But yeah, with the card play and with the actions and like the suite of actions and the way the cards are structured, and with the meter track and how the board was laid out, we kind of had all the ingredients to just like create fighters. And with the way it would work is we would create a fighter. I need to turn off Teams because Teams is coming up. 1 second. Yeah. So sorry if you were checking your Teams then because of the audio. But yeah. So once we had all that, we create a fighter. We'd have like a core set of actions and moves and cadence and speeds of the cards based off what type of archetype they're supposed to be in a fighting game. And then, like, for example, Cage, he's a grappler, so his average initiative speed, which is the speeds in which the cards are played out on the board, would be higher than, say, a rushdown fighter like Mercury, which would be lower. And that's how we would, like, sort of work with that. Yeah, once we had all those ingredients, all we needed to do was really come up with 1 or 2 unique mechanics per fighter, and those sort of like either build on the base game or they change the base game in some way. And so that was a really fulfilling development process, along with the fact that the Discord server was really active with playtesters, especially when the Kickstarter went live. Like, we got so many people in who wanted to playtest the game. Like, it was really, really fulfilling, and it was great, honestly. So yeah, honestly, I've never had such a more rewarding development cycle ever. So I couldn't have wanted for anything else. However, we then talk about this guy here, marketing. So marketing is not my strong suit. And because of this, I hired another company to do this. Like, I managed to be able to get a bit of funding from friends and family in order to put a bit of money into marketing because they really believed in the project, as well as the job I was at the time. I was a contractor, so I was actually paid quite a bit so I could put that into the business. And so we had like a decent marketing budget, and we decided to go balls to the walls with like Facebook marketing. One of the lessons which I can bestow immediately on you is that, and one thing you should check out, by the way, is the Crowdfunding Nerds podcast, 100%. The Crowdfunding Nerds are the 2 people, Andrew Lowen, and I can't remember the name of the other guy. I do apologize. Both of them are equally important. It's just I'm terrible with names. Andrew Lowen made the board game Deliverance. You might have heard of that if you haven't heard of him. But yeah, they run the Crowdfunding Nerds podcast, and they do consultations. And yeah, one thing which I've learned since from them, after speaking to them and having a consultation session, is that basically what we did marketing-wise on paper was great, but what actually worked out to be the case was not particularly great. I'm gonna peel back the curtain a bit here. So, the way. So first of all, I'll talk about what we did. So the first thing that we did, which was a mistake, is that we asked for email signups directly from Facebook. So Facebook marketing is like the main sort of way you market Kickstarters, because there's like a lot of the audience is on Facebook, if you didn't know. And yeah, we asked for email signups directly on Facebook, and what that did is it got us a lot of email signups. We ended up with like 1,500, which is really good for the money we spent. But the conversion rate from email signups to backers was exceedingly low. I think it was like a 2% conversion, when the average estimate is between like 9 and 11%, which is what we were basing all the first day hype on. We're like, oh yeah, we're gonna get this many people. Like, if you do the maths, 10%, 150 backers just from emails. We had a lot of pre-launch signups on Kickstarter as well. If we do like sort of the 10% conversion on that, even though that's usually a bit lower, then really we should have had about 200 backers day one. And what we had was, which is, by the way, still great. I'm not complaining at all during any of this, because, you know, making my dream of making this game a reality, that's the bottom line. I'm just talking about like lessons that you can learn, hopefully, from the experience which I had. Is that we had about, I think, 45 backers day one, so about a 20% of what we were expecting, which is, yeah, it was a significant blow day one. I'd say that 100%, because one thing which, you know, like, because that's the thing as well, from people who know the game better than me in terms of the Kickstarter game and the marketing game, who know like what they're doing, they all said the same thing. I was like, I give them the figures. They're like, oh yeah, you should expect like about like between like 150, 200 backers, maybe more day one. Like 200 is kind of the conservative, I heard some people say. And then to go to sleep, I think it's about like 8 hours after the campaign launched, and we're on like 30 backers. I was like, what has gone wrong here? And I'm thinking about all the money that we spent on marketing. It was so much money. And, you know, is the Kickstarter even going to fund? You know, that was one thing. But what I will say, there is one additional thing to take away from this, is that we did something else with marketing, which actually worked really, really well. Like, in terms of like the conversion rate return, it was like incredible. So if you don't know, there's this YouTuber called Gecko, and what Gecko does on YouTube is he talks about digital fighting games. So his name's Gecko Squirrel, and he talks about digital fighting games. Oh my god, do you not want to play that? Sorry, I'm just getting up his channel. So yeah, he talks about digital video game fighting games. And we through a mutual friend, I managed to be able to reach out to him and get a sponsored slot in one of his videos, and this kind of changed the trajectory of the Fatal Knockout Kickstarter once more back to a more positive thing, because this was, I think the video came out day 3 of the Kickstarter, when we were on about 50 backers, I think. Maybe we were on like 55 or something. And once that video came out, I think that by the end of day 4, we gained like 30 backers, which was nearly like 50% of what we gained. So like we had a bigger day 4 than we did a day 2, which is like very much unheard of in terms of Kickstarters. And so this is an interesting one, because Fatal Knockout is a very sort of unique game in that what we're doing is we're trying to mimic a digital game. Really, we're trying to mimic a digital game and make it feel as real as possible and as very low one-to-one as possible. So it's difficult to say, oh yeah, just reach out to someone who does video game stuff, because their conversion rates are much higher than people who do board game stuff, because that's not going to be applicable in like 95% of cases. But what I will say is, I think that putting in a lot of stock into influencers and what they can do, and making sure this is like the key takeaway, making sure that their audience is best suited to you and your game is like pivotal, because it's we obviously we got very lucky because Fatal Knockout is essentially designed for Gecko Squirrel's audience and for other video game fighting game YouTubers audience because that's the whole point, is it's trying to make a game which should be fun for everyone, but is to make those people feel in particular like, wow, this is actually feeling like a fighting game that I would play like with a controller, but I'm playing it with cards and a board, you know. So that was a big turning point, and that sort of put us on a trajectory to get funded. I think like we were halfway through the campaign when we ended up getting funded. I think it was like with 150 backers, I think, something like that. So that was really cool, honestly. That was like, wow, okay, like that's amazing. And what else? What the other thing it did as well, and we'll get onto the next section in a sec. But what it did is it really essentially created the Crab Studios / Fatal Knockout community. We had about 45 people in the server when the Kickstarter launched, and along with people coming because of the Kickstarter, but like especially with Gecko, bringing in people who are really active in the community. Like I think we're on like 110 people in the server now, which is just absolutely insane. Like it's really active, like people playing FKO with each other. We do tournaments every month, and you know it was just like, this is, you know, this you know when people say like everything happened for a reason, I was like, yeah, that makes sense in this case. But yeah, so what we're going to do now is we're going to move on and we're going to talk about the actual Kickstarter campaign and one thing which went really well. So with the Kickstarter campaign, yeah, like I said, we've talked a bit about how it started, but what we want to do is we'll try and like keep the community involved, and that's something that we're going to do with the next Kickstarter campaign as well. But if we go to the actual page, I can scroll down to the updates, and I can show you exactly what I mean by about keeping the community going. So first of all, one thing I will say is that one thing I was super happy about is just how sort of the Kickstarter page came together. Like we got the logo here, introduction to Fatal Knockout, a bunch of really cool images. Like people are getting like sort of hit over the head with like, oh, this is a cool looking like unique game. We went to Arcade Club in Leeds as well. Like if you can't tell by the name, a business which, you know, focuses on making like arcade experiences. Like you have arcade machines, you have a bunch of other different types of games that you can play. And yeah, I thought it was just yeah, you can see that the stage changes into two. Like we had a graphic designer on this as well called Migley, and she did really well in putting this page together. And yeah, honestly, just really happy about it. There's some decisions which I make now which I wouldn't have made back then, of way round even, in terms of how stuff looks. But yeah, really happy with the reviews as well. The reviews did really, pretty much every single reviewer loved the game, which I was pretty happy about. So yeah, there's that. We got the people who made the game, the partners, the community stuff. It's mad now. Like I should have promoted the Discord server way more. Like it's literally a tiny link at the bottom of the screen, and still we had loads of people click on it, which was really cool. But yeah, so going to the updates, one thing that we did to try and keep the community involved, there's a Post-Mortem update if you want to read it. It is quite long. Is we will scroll down. So we got 36 total updates. So yeah, we got, this is I think when we got funded. Yeah, so a project funded successfully on March 28th. Final 24 hours. Yeah, so here we go. We'll get down here. Load. We have, yeah, so what we wanted to do is we wanted to this is something we're going to do in the next Kickstarter as well. We wanted to allow people to name fighters. So what we did on the Discord server is the Discord server put like a bunch of names to me. I picked 4, and then I put those to the Kickstarter community. And so we for example, this guy ended up, it was called a kinetic fighter, but ended up being called Surge. And you can see that through the comments that we had a bunch of people voting for Surge. Like, did anybody else? No, literally, oh, someone voted for Dash, everyone else voted for Surge, and then that's how we got the name, which was crazy. But yeah, so we did this with all 4 fighters. That got a lot of engagement, which really helps with Kickstarter's algorithm and getting it up on the the browsers, which I thought was really cool. On the browser list and that sort of thing. And yeah, so that's one thing that we did during the Kickstarter. We also ran 2 tournaments, I believe, which was crazy. And yeah, the Kickstarter overall went really, really well. I'm gonna turn this off, the audio off, before we get into it. But yeah, we had like a little animated section as well, as you can see here, at the start of the Kickstarter page. We're gonna do, little spoiler alert for the next trailer, we're going to do something similar, but we're going to put it at the end, because what we want to do is we want to really focus on this sort of stuff here, the like what the game is actually about, which I think would be better. Anyway, let us move on to the next part that I want to talk about, which is, this is where we start sort of getting into, like, what, apart from the marketing stuff, which was kind of a big blunder, what we could, a bunch of stuff which we're going to do better for the future stuff. So first of all, what we'll talk about is we'll talk about late pledges. So if you don't know about late pledges, most Kickstarters do this, and to be fair, the main reason why they started doing this is because of shipping and the way shipping works with how Kickstarter used to do shipping anyway, is that the shipping money that you would receive would count towards the goal, which meant that you had to it made it so that it was very risky to determine exactly what to charge for shipping and, what to set your goal at. Because, like, just picture this. Like, you have your goal set to, like 5K. So let's just make it around 5K. And it's set to 5K because it's going to cost 5,000 to manufacture the game. Okay, and then you have you're charging shipping in the Kickstarter as well. And for US, it's $20. For UK, it's 15. For EU, it's 12. Something like that. And so you're like, okay, well, I need 5,000 exactly to fund my Kickstarter. Maybe let's not have the goal be 5,000. Because I need to have room as well for shipping, because, like, say for example, if it reaches exactly 5,000, but like 2,000 of that is from shipping, that means I only have 3,000 for the actual Kickstarter, because I need to use that money that people gave me for shipping to ship the games. So let's say, okay, we're going to estimate it's 2,000 for shipping. So we're going to set the goal at 7,000. Say, for example, to achieve the 7,000, you need, like, I don't know, 200 backers. Okay. If, for example, shipping for everyone was £10 each, then, or $10 each, then that would be okay, because that would equal 2,000. So so you'd have the 5,000 for manufacturing and 2,000 for shipping. However, let's say for example this was all, like, we changed UK to £10. Say for example this was all UK. You can't control where your backers come from, and you will need to charge more depending on where they're at. So if you had US, which, was 20, and that was all 200 backers, then all of a sudden, it's costing 4,000. It's costing 4,000, and then you're 2,000 in the hole. And so anyway, that is why people used to, like, started using late pledges, and that's why these platforms came to be. BackerKit, Pledge Manager, there's others I can't think of right now. These types of platforms, because you could charge for shipping later and not have that contribute to your goal. And additionally as well, Kickstarter wouldn't take 5% of that shipping, so you could actually use all the shipping money, because you could pay up front for stuff like BackerKit. You could use all that shipping money to actually ship the games, which is quite helpful. It'd be really nice if Kickstarter had a feature like that. I know they made a bunch of updates recently. They might have something similar now. But yeah, anyway. So because of this, and also to open up late pledges and the Pledge Manager, where people could still get the game afterwards, which actually ended up being really good. Like, we ended up making like an extra 40% of like what we made on Kickstarter just through the pledge manager, which is really, really helpful. Like it actually made it so that it wasn't a complete catastrophe when the later stuff happened, which I'll get into. But yeah, so we did the late pledge manager, and the main mistake I made with this, and I'll be completely upfront, and it was just negligent on my part, and something which I won't do in the future. So the backer kit has tools to automate when stuff opens, when stuff closes, when stuff is charged, that sort of thing, and I opted to do it manually because I didn't know, because we're still sort of in the process of like choosing a manufacturer, which I'll get onto in the manufacturing section soon. But yeah, so I wanted to do it all manually, and what that meant is that like sometimes I would just like, for example, when manufacturing was done and we went to ship out, I forgot to close the pledge manager, which meant that we had about 10 late pledges which weren't part of any sort of shipping plan, and that led to delays. And we also had like people sort of coming in at like sort of the wrong times and getting charged at different times as well, because I charge cards, for example, when we need to start paying for manufacturing, because we need to pay for the products which people bought on the pledge manager. And then like more people come in and I charge them, and like people would from the previous charge their cards would get declined, but then they updated them and then they get charged at a different time, and it was just uncertainty. So from the beginning we're going to set very clear dates, because also we're going to have a much smoother post-production plan with the next Kickstarter. Set consider like a black and white dates of when stuff's going to happen, and we're going to stick to them. And if we for some reason which I cannot predict right now, we need to change them, then we'll do a Kickstarter update and make it certain, and then it will happen on that new date, because that was just an absolute nightmare. And we will close the pledge manager when shipping starts, as you should do that. So yeah, that was a bit of a nightmare on my part, but that's something which we're going to sort, and it's going to be fine. Next thing we talked about is manufacturing. Manufacturing actually went relatively okay. There were two major issues. Both we are fixing, and pretty much are already fixed. We have safeguards in place and stuff to de-risk this stuff. So the first thing is that Fatal Knockout wasn't in a state where it was ready to be manufactured based off the prototypes that I got made from a different manufacturer. Because first of all, different factories have different makeups, they have different things that they can do and they can't do. Fatal Knockout is a very unique game. It has a very unique box. Like, I don't know any other game which has two bottom boxes. So there was a lot of stuff and a lot of back and forth which we needed to figure out how to get it right, which took quite a bit of time. But also as well is something which is, to be fair, it's kind of part of development, but it really goes into manufacturing, because this is when you do last checks. There are a few spelling mistakes and there are a few misprints. And this is completely down to me being a one-man band. So, like, I say we a lot, because I do work with other people. Like, I work with Fodsley on the artwork, I work with Dan on some of the design stuff. But in terms of games, it's entirely me. And so, yeah, occasionally I will misspell something. Pretty much in every game I've ever made, there's been at least one spelling mistake right on the box somewhere. It's kind of like my trademark at this point. But the main kicker, because honestly, spelling mistakes, I personally I don't care about. Like, I know some people do care about them, and we're gonna be fixing them. Say what the de-risk factor is, getting a community member, Draconis, to help proofread everything, as well as getting other people who I work with to properly proofread every single thing before it gets sent out. Because I know that's a big deal for some people and it's unprofessional. But in comparison, the biggest thing the game had misprint errors, and these were a big deal. Like, it's difficult to sort of overstate how big this was, and which is mad, because like some people in the what's it called, in the comments when the replacements arrived were like, oh, is this it? Like, you made it seem like a much bigger deal. Like, I guess maybe because I'm too close and it was a bigger deal than I thought it was. But yeah, anyway, what I'll do is I'll share my screen here. So what we have here is these. Thankfully, kindly, someone sent these in to me. When the game arrived, like, I think I was playing Overwatch at the time or something like that, like just with my friends, and then the Discord sort of blew up with this, and I was like, no, I didn't even realize the game was supposed to be arriving to people. Like, I actually had no idea that the game was supposed to be arriving to people. So I got this, and it was the just to boil it down to you, if you especially don't know about what Fatal Knockout is that there was a misprint where 6 of the cards had the wrong card backs. And this is an issue because with this being such a competitive strategic game, if one card has the wrong card back, then the other player will know what that card is, and that will ruin the game competitively for people. So, what I really wanted to do is get this fixed, and this was going to cost a lot of money to get fixed, and it did cost a lot of money to get fixed. Basically, all the money which was left in the business, which was supposed to be for the next Kickstarter, had to go into this to get this fixed. Which means that our next campaign is actually running at a much lower marketing budget. So, yeah, hopefully it does well. Anyway, we'll talk about that at the end anyway. But yeah, so this was completely down to me just like I duplicated on the print sheet, I duplicated one card by accident when I was moving cards about and getting them ready. And in a sea of 65 cards per sheet, I just didn't see it. And so that was the mistake. And with this, we are again going to be using Draconis and other people to proofread everything, make sure it is perfect. And also, one thing as well, and this is something which kind of masks the issue, is that when I receive, I do get a prototype of the final version of the game before it gets fully manufactured, and there was a complete mess of other issues, and so I just didn't see this. So resolving all those other issues should make it so that if there is something like this, we can catch it. But like the plan is to not have like this happen. Thankfully, 7 out of 10 fighters, Fatal Knockout plus oddities, as well as the 3 solo fighters, all completely playable, all completely fine. It was just 3 out of the 6 base fighters had issues which needed to be solved. I appreciate everyone's patience on this because it took so it's April 19th when it started arriving to people, and it took until August, September, for some people October, to get these replacement cards. Like, it took a long time because we had to do a full print run of these cards, and we had to fill them and get them to people and everything like that. And it did take a long time because it was like making another game, even though it was only 6 cards. It had to go through the full process of getting like approved and then manufactured, distributed. So I appreciate that, and I'm hoping as well that sort of says to people that, like, yeah, we can make mistakes. Again, I'm a one-man band, but if it's something which is going to affect the quality of the game, then I'll fix it. Like, it doesn't matter the cost. I will fix it. So yeah, the only other thing with manufacturing is something which we are currently investigating and hopefully gonna fix with the High Rolls expansion, is that the standee holders, like when you have games and they have like standees and holders, they were a tiny bit small, off the standees, which is honestly the same for a lot of games. Like, it's consistent, but with a lot of games, they don't have the standees clear. They have them like blacked out or colored, probably for that reason. So I've been sent different standee holders, and then like if we can, like, if I can find the right ones and approve them, then we'll probably ship like a pack of 10 in the High Rollers expansion. So for people who've got the base game and all, it is good. So yeah, then we get on to the final big guy, the final big one. We're talking distribution. This was an absolute bloody nightmare to me because I've never done distribution like this before. With my past 2 projects, Food Time, Battle in Space and Landscape, what I did is I fulfilled it all myself. So it was manufactured in the UK. I literally drove to the factory, drove home, and then I went to the post office and I fulfilled them myself. Like, that's what I did, and it was before COVID. No, it wasn't before COVID. It was during COVID, but it was before Brexit took effect. So this was possible. Now it's not, because especially with EU, like, the amount of customs regulations that are in place now, just absolutely ridiculous. Way to send anything from here to the EU. Absolutely, yeah. It's literally small business. But anyway, so I went. I was originally going to go. I'm going to speak candidly about this, but please hear the words that I say as well. I originally was going to work with ShipQuest, who are very well respected. I know a bunch of people in the industry worked with them before and heard nothing but good things about them. Worked with them for over a year on getting this game distributed. I heard, and I had nothing but good things to say about them. And then I got we had got all the quotes of how much everything was going to cost in terms of like shipping, and that's what structured the costs for the Kickstarter page. But then I got a hit with an email which saying, "Oh, before we start shipping, we get this game from China to our warehouses, and that's going to cost £4,000." Which was not a cost I had factored into anything at all. It was not discussed previously, and it's probably because it's in this industry, it's a given, you know. Probably thought, oh, this is this guy's fourth game. He knows that freight is going to come into it. I did not know freight was going to come into it. I can't tell you the feeling which I had when I got that email saying this is going to be an extra £4,000. You look at the Kickstarter, it's we charge shipping at cost for people first of all. But if you look at the Kickstarter, it was 2,000 overfunded, and yeah, we might have had 2,000 in excess. But that ended up going to other stuff. Because to be fair, I will say with shipping, we didn't just charge at cost. We subsidized a certain country because it was very expensive. And it was a disadvantage for us to charge more because like people who are based in other countries charge less. Um, but yeah, so we didn't have basically bottom line we didn't have the 4,000 to be able to do this. Like with everyone shipping with any excess which was from the Kickstarter, we didn't have we just didn't have the funds. Um, and so I was like, right, what am I going to do? So just at bottom line, it is not ShipQuest's fault why we didn't end up going with them at all. It was something which I should have known, 100%. And maybe there was maybe a communication thing there, but overall, it's something which I should have known and factored in. Thankfully, the manufacturer of the game also does fulfillment, and they could do the freight and the shipping sort of combined together, and just at a cheaper rate. It still ended up costing way more than the company got from all the shipping charges, and it cost way more than expected, and it ate into the company's finances quite a lot. But it got done at a cheaper rate, and I'll always be thankful to the Hero Time for doing that. We managed to be able to work out a few things and move a few things around to be able to do that. For example, one thing with request is that they needed to freight all the games over, like every single copy, even though we didn't end up we printed way more copies than we made than we like over to backers from the Kickstarter, but so we had excess in the factory waiting to be freighted over. But thankfully, working with the manufacturer and saying, "Yo, we're going to do another the Kickstarter in which we get the base game and the Odyssey expansion. Can you hold on to them until the end of that Kickstarter?" They were like, "Yeah," and that sliced easily in half the cost. It was. I'm very grateful. But one lesson to learn: just just figure out what the freight's going to be. Ask who you ask to figure out what the freight is going to be to get your games from China to the to wherever to warehouses or whatever, because it's gonna be expensive, especially nowadays. So that's kind of the post-mortem. And probably missed some stuff. Again, if you want more details, then make sure to check out the update. One thing I'll talk about now briefly is I'll talk about the next Kickstarter. I've mentioned it a few times. It is for the next expansion for Fatal Knockout, called Fatal Knockout High Rollers. And what this expansion is it's very similar to the Odyssey's expansion, is that it's a more stuff expansion. It's more fighters. So the Fatal Knockout High Rollers expansion comes with 4 more fighters. And the main thing that I'm going to take away from doing this video and also from just doing the previous Kickstarter is that we've learned so many lessons that I'm going to be really shocked if things don't go a little bit smoother this time around, and we don't, we don't have like as many problems. Like I'll be shocked if we have more problems. But yeah, 4 new fighters. Honestly, they changed the game. They are so fun. They are for me the 4 most fun fighters in the game. And I think it's good that people in the Discord server, for example, are saying this as well. It proves that we are adding value to the game rather than just adding more stuff, which does add value. It does add replay value. I think now there's like currently 91 different fighter combinations for high rollers. Oh, sorry, for Fatal Knockout with the high rollers expansion. So there's loads of replayability. But yeah, it shows that we're kind of like making better and better fighters, which is great. I love that. So yeah, if you're interested at all in Fatal Knockout, if you love fighting games, if you love strategic card playing games, if you just want to support Crab Studios as a business as well, then make sure to check out the Kickstarter page. I'll leave a link in the description. Hit notify me on launch. It launches in 4 days on the 29th of October. So yeah, and it runs for 21 days. So if you're watching this, then there might be a chance that it is still up if you're watching this in the future. Anyway, that's it from me. Very, very long-winded. Very, very long video. But yeah, anyway, hopefully you enjoyed it. And yeah, if you want more stuff like this, let me know. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.